GDP, gross domestic product, the monetary measure by which we can assess and compare a country's economy and its growth. But have we ever stopped to think about what this actually means? And where do our women or our environment come into the equation? In reality, they don't. The contribution of household labour, such as cooking, cleaning, or childcare, is not involved in this equation for growth. It is instead removed in order to achieve simplicity, a decision that can only be made when man is considered the default. The result, a take, make, waste model of consumption, which has been led by developed countries and their white male leaders. Our current systems of thinking are not fit for our climate crisis. We have been speaking about the climate crisis for far too long, with the same people promising us and failing to deliver on it, year after year after year, promising to protect our ecosystems and our people, yet edging closer to that 2-degree limit or our 2050 net zero targets. The discussion instead of climate change should be one of an intersection of race, class, gender, and any other demographic that is left out of our decision-making processes. Our current ways of thinking are deep-rooted in history and colonialism, and it is the developed nations who are exclaiming to be leading the way, forgetting once too that we were the ones that relied on coal to grow so quickly. It is, however, not about blaming our male leaders for their role in accelerating our climate crisis, or maybe just a few. It is instead about recognizing a series of complicated systems that are in place by which we are all governed to and have resulted in practices that benefit the few. It does not have to be this way. Imagine instead businesses, leaders, and individuals like us here today recognizing our responsibility and taking action. And women are leading the way. Research has shown that women tend to prioritize future communities or their local community or their future generations in resource management. And a study in 2019 by Curtis Business School found that more women in Parliament pass more stringent climate change policies. And this is shown by the Green Living ranking in 2021, where 6 out of the 8 best performing countries were led by women. And we're seeing this worldwide, with instances such as Iceland's Prime Minister calling for an alternative to GDP that includes societal measures. Yet, women only make up 30% of global or national climate change negotiation bodies. And what's scarier is that those most likely to be in charge are those most likely to be climate change skeptics. White, conservative, male leaders. Our choices, in a sense, result from 2 things: our upbringing or our values. So let's look closer to home. It's not only that women are driving the way on a global or national level, but also in their own lives, their own lifestyle choices. Women are responsible for 94% of household purchases, and 59% of women are moving towards using less single-use plastics and recycling, in comparison to 51% men. And looking more broadly, men are responsible for 16% more greenhouse gas emissions from the goods that they buy in comparison to women, even when spending the same amount overall. And when women were asked why it was they were taking the decisions they were, most notably things like future generations and local communities came up. Whereas in the answers for men in reducing emissions, the highest one, as you can see, is to avoid tax. So why is this? Why is it that men are less likely to think about their impact on the wider environment unless money comes into the equation? A study in 2020 by Penn State University found that men are less likely to use a reusable bag out of the fear of being assumed gay. Trust me, guys, this may actually bump you up a few points. Instead, are men so motivated to safeguard their sexual identity that they will actually cause environmental damage? Or is it that they are not affected enough by the climate crisis to join in? or that women, because we are childbearers, that we care more about our future generations. Whether women are born caring about people and the planet, or we learn it. There is evidence that suggests femininity and greenness are linked, and that it plays out into the careers we go into, the businesses we start, or the actions we take. I'm aware too that today I am speaking to you from a position of privilege, a white, abled woman living in the UK with a high level of education. It is important to remember those most affected by the climate crisis are those women living in developing nations. 80% of people displaced by climate-related issues are women, and women are 14 times more likely to die during a natural disaster. So, women are doing the most, yet suffering the most, and still have little to no access to resources in our current decision-making processes. Much of this stems from the fact that their doing happens in the informal space, the way they choose to live their lives, or the way in which they choose to raise their children. I am lucky enough to have been mothered by a fierce woman, a woman who has raised 3 children through tremendous periods of turmoil, homelessness, and living on the breadline. A woman who has taught me always to be kind, caring, and loving to everyone. A woman who has taught me that money means independence and not happiness. Growing up, we lived and breathed what people would now call a sustainable or zero-waste lifestyle. I was always embarrassed by the fact that we didn't have the branded beans or the branded cereals that just tasted that little bit better than the unbranded ones. Or that in my youthful opinion, our cupboards were always empty. Yet you managed to make a meal from what seemed like nothing. And I was always particularly embarrassed by the bright pink car with black paw prints on it that waited for me outside the school gates next to the fancy cars. Mum, you taught me resource efficiency and how to live a sustainable life every single day. You sacrificed so much to provide us with the resources so we could go on to do what we have done today. At 8 years old, I wanted to be the Prime Minister. I've heard there's an opening recently. At 12 years old, I was told I had dyslexia. I was told I needed extra support because I couldn't do things normal kids could. At 15 years old, I did the dreaded careers test to find out what career I was right for. I was told I could be a teacher or a carer. At 17 years old, I met my stepdad, the man who first introduced me to what sustainability meant in business or in careers. The man who first introduced me to the sustainability principles, the 3-legged stool, where the economy, or money in a simple sense, is no more or less important than our people, our society, and our environment. Combined, both their alternative ways of doing things have led me on a path to study global sustainable development at university. My goal, to make a difference. At 21 years old, I was surrounded by men choosing to go into careers such as finance or auditing, completing a new graduate scheme exam every single week. Was I meant to be doing the same? I tried my hand at it, and it's fair to say those aren't very dyslexic friendly. However, I actually got one of these jobs, and I thought this meant I was destined for success. But 2 months later, and thanks to COVID, the job was cancelled, and I was back out again on the search. Unbeknown to me at the time, this was one of life's defining moments. I had allowed myself to get wrapped up in societal measures and pressures, and I needed to revert back to what my core values were. What was it I wanted to do? What was it I wanted to achieve? I wanted to be a problem solver. So instead, I came up with an idea to solve the waste crisis within the beauty and beverage industry, fusing 2 industries very unlike one another to work together to create circular cosmetics, taking waste from one and repurposing it for the other. Imagine instead giving value to waste. Shouldn't this be the priority in our ever-increasing resource-deprived world instead of our take, make, waste model? Imagine instead money not being the driver, but an outcome of a different series of thinking that prioritizes people and planet. Imagine challenging industry norms and not taking them for granted. Imagine a world where more women have more say, power, and agency to aid in this just transition. What would this world look like? Women would bring inclusive growth, a diversity of thought, and empathy and compassion. When we live in a capitalist world of mass consumption, and patriarchy, the oppression of women and the destruction of nature is a natural consequence. We are not thriving. We are barely surviving. Recently, I've become an auntie, for which I am eternally grateful for. However, it's got me thinking, what does my future look like? Will I choose to bring children into this world in its current state? We are in need of a huge power shift. We have been speaking about the climate crisis for far too long, with the same people promising us and failing to deliver on it. It is all our responsibility. I want you here to ask yourself today, what will it take? What will it take for you to understand your responsibility and take action? Will it take your homes and businesses being at continual flood or fire risk? Will it take yourself or your family having to access food banks, knowing of the food shortage we have and food crisis we have in the UK, and only about 60 harvests left? Or will it take your child becoming ill from microplastic ingestion from meat and dairy? For me, the first real step to taking real climate action began on a drive home on the M6. The irony, right? I had pulled off to get a snack and had parked up next to a lorry carrying sheep to where we all know is the farm. As soon as I stepped out of my car, I was bombarded with the shrieking from the sheep in the lorry. The kind of screams you don't just hear, but feel in your body. I stared, looking at the sheep through the tiny slits, their eyes catching the light from headlights of cars passing, and I began to sob. I wanted to let them free. I feared for their next move. The first real step to taking real climate action is being in the know of what you can do and how you can do it. As an individual in the audience today, the two largest areas by which you can make the most impact are with your food and your money. Where is it that your money is being stored? What is it that your money is funding? What bank, what pension fund? Your food, your diet. What is it that you're consuming? Can you consume less meat, less dairy, or buy with seasonality and locality in mind? I want you to embrace your femininity, your greenness, whatever it is that makes you feel more or do more. However, I also want you to challenge. I want you to challenge our current ways of doing things. We are in need of much better role models for our future, and we need more men in positions of power bringing women into this space. We need more women in decision-making processes, more women of a different race, a different age, a different demographic, so that we can use a low-gendered lens for our future development. You do not need to be in this space. You do not need to be in this space to aid in this transition. We are all responsible to have the courage to change our current ways of thinking and create new ones. For our future generations, our people now, and our planet always.